Welcome to another episode of my series on narrative. As I mentioned in virtually every one of these, I co-created a theory of narrative 30 years ago that became the Dramatica software, which has been used by hundreds of thousands of people around the world. Okay, fine, there's some credibility here. This is my core dump. I'm 70 years old, I'm retired, and I want to record everything I know about narrative and the model of how it works and the story structure in the real world and all that before I'm gone. So all that work and knowledge and information is imparted to you. Let's get on with it then. You'll find some overlap from episode to episode, but I go into different details and different depths. Today, I want to talk about something that is familiar to people using Dramatica, that stories are based in fours. A quad. Imagine a quad of 4 squares. Stories are based in 4s, not in 2s. And we talked earlier about how you look at DNA as the genome of an individual. But if you look at stories, you see that they come into a quad helix. It's actually one double helixed around the other. So the two are helixing around each other, creating a very complex form. It's actually my suspicion that they will find that DNA itself is a quad helix. The double helix is what you see in terms of where the genes are and whether you're going to have blue eyes or not because of these settings and how all the 4 bases go together. However, I believe that that's just the blueprint of what needs to be built to create a critter, and that's what DNA is, a critter or a flower. However, if you look at the order in which construction needs to take place, the processes, the temporal side of it, I think you'll find a whole double helix that's not in the spatial arrangement directly, but is in that sequential information, not just the gene sequence. Here's something that may or may not be true, but it's a speculation. That's what I'm sharing with you, my speculations. Suppose you take the double helix of DNA and you look at not what follows it on the chain, but you look at what's connected from one part of the helix to the next. In other words, if you look at a slinky, you go from one ring to the next ring to the next ring to the next ring, and when you go through 4, you've created another quad. Just like the 4 bases that create the wraparound, you've got 4 bases sideways that work up from one spiral to the next. So in stories, we found that whether they're in the real world or in fiction, you don't come full circle, you come full spiral. Just like they say, you can't step into the same river twice, or first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. You've come full circle, but you're not at the same level. And that vertical creates a sideways, almost a conceptual quad of 4 things. So that ultimately, the quads are being created both horizontally and vertically. Now, that creates a model that looks like a Rubik's Cube, where it has vertical and horizontal sections that rather than just being 4 items, okay, that you're looking at, they stack up and form blocks. And I've got links down below if you want to go check it out in the description that go to the chart that we use in Dramatica, which we also used when we were working with the intelligence agencies, the NRO, NSA, CIA, for about 10 years, helping use narrative to project what terrorists would do and what unfriendly nations would do and how they would react to things we would do using narrative. It was very, very successful, but it was that chart that's an exploration of what it is that is contained within narrative. It's kind of a periodic table of narrative elements. In fact, I think that's what we called it, periodic table of story elements or something on it. A little pretentious, but it works the same way. There's families, just like in the periodic table, just like you have noble gases and rare earths. Some of the families that you find, the major families in stories, whether real world or fiction, are characters, plot, theme, and genre. 4 items again, 4. It keeps coming back. Characters, plot, and theme. Why are there 4? Well, I'll be going over this many, many times because we're going to go into why it's there and how it works and how to use it and how it connects to other stuff. But for today, I just want to focus on this 4-ness. I don't have a lot of graphic support here. If anybody wants to put some in the comments to help people, I'll add them to description links so that folks can see these. There is a lot of graphic material created. I'm not going to bother going to find it after a third of a century, having it boxed up somewhere. So what I want to talk about is fours, and here's some to think about. noun, verb, adjective, and adverb. Okay, we all know them. Those are the four bases of grammar. Noun, verb, adjective, adjective. Noun is the most tangible of things. It doesn't change. It's a thing. Okay. Verb is a process. It's an activity, something going on. All right. Adjective modifies the simple thing, and the more complex process is modified by the adverb. But the adverb always seemed a little out of place for me. That's the one I had trouble with when I was learning language. Adverb. It just seems like it's the odd man out. Which of these things is not like the others? Noun, verb, adjective, kind of tangible, and then this adverb, it modifies a process. What the heck is that? I didn't get it. Well, later on in working on Dramatica and story structure, I came up with a list of some other ones, like you find in science and subnuclear and physics and astrophysics. I mean, you find the strong forces, the weak forces, electromagnetism, and gravity. Those are the four primary forces: strong, weak, electromagnetism, and gravity. Okay, gravity is the odd man out in that case. It's just different than the other three. The other three are sort of waveforms, and they have gravity waves. It is, but it's a different kind of beast. It just feels different. And you'll find that's true in story structure and in psychology structure, which we'll get into, sociology structure, and physics as well. Another one would be going back to what early man and people who are in touch with the real world, earth, water, wind, and fire. Earth has substance. Wind has substance. Water has substance. But fire, that's a different kind of thing. It doesn't fall in with those other three. And I'll tell you a little bit about that why at the end. Remind me how you're going to do that. I'll try to remind myself. Okay, talk to you about that at the end. If not, I'll pick it up next time. All right, how about even in physics? Mass and energy and space and time. Mass, energy, space, time. Mass and energy and space, again, they all kind of fit together. You can get that. Here's space, here's some objects in it. Those are mass. They move around with energy, collide, and even E equals mc squared. They can be converted from mass to energy and energy to mass. Okay, and then time. Time is the odd man out. It's the weird thing. It's what's hard to get your head around, and somehow connects to the others. We end up with space-time. There's a reason that it's blended with space and time within the universe, as opposed to seeing space and time as separate things like you see mass and energy. You always look at mass and energy, and when you decide to include time, so you're not just looking at mass, energy, and space, simple view, Cro-Magnon view, suddenly you add time in, and you've got it's not time, it's space-time. Okay, time is very seldom looked at as an individual item, but those are the four bases like DNA, of physics. Well, it turns out that if you look at mass and energy and space and time, there are four internal equivalents. What if you're not looking in the outside universe, but you're looking in the inside universe? What's in here? I know that if you look at Dianetics, I think it is, or Scientology, or whatever, something, it says there's mass, energy, space, time, and theta. Theta is this one thing that's all one homogeneous internal. No. Okay, mass and energy, space, and time are real, whether you're talking to a Scientologist or whether you're talking to a physicist. Those are real. But theta, no. You have the four internal equivalents in the inner universe. They are knowledge, thought, ability, and desire. That's mental ability, desire. We'll define these more later, but think of it this way. Knowledge is the most massive thing in the mind. It's the most intransigent to change. It's something that is like a piece of material, whether you have a box or a bed or a basketball. That's mass, okay? In your head, you have knowledge that you've accumulated, you've proven, you've tested. It's what you know, and it is the least subject to the capricious whims of thought and consciousness. Knowledge, like mass. Energy works with mass, okay, insofar as it can move it around like, hitting a pool ball, billiards, and knocking one ball into another can make energy. You could build brick walls by using energy to assemble pieces of knowledge into a greater understanding in your head, okay? It's like energy. But just like okay? The equals mc squared, which says that you can convert one to the other, nothing's ever lost, conservation of energy, all that stuff. When you take mass, a little bit of mass, like in a nuclear furnace, can generate an awful lot of energy. But it takes a bunch of energy to convert it into a single little bit of mass. And similarly in our head, a tiny bit of knowledge can generate an awful lot of thought. But it takes a tremendous amount of thought to arrive at a single piece of knowledge. True knowledge. Not just, oh, that's true because I know it's true. No. Okay, so now let us talk about ability and desire. These are the harder ones to get in a quick talk now, and I'll do more on it later. But just as you look at space, how do you know where space is? Well, it's what's in between this thing and that thing. The rest of it is space. It's what these sit in, space. Okay, so ability is really looking at what you know compared to what you don't know. You don't know is this area around it. What you know is the stuff that's in it. When you take knowledge, you can say, well, I know this, I know this. They often say that you have what you know that you know, what you know that you don't know, what you don't know that you know, what you don't know that you don't know. So you've got all of the combinations, and you know what? That's another group of 4. It just keeps popping up because that's the way our minds work. When we make narratives, we're replicating what we do in our own heads to look at them externally and understand what's going on from an objective perspective as if we were not involved. That's not possible. The observer changes the observation, but it gives us our best chance of trying to get an objective view as much as possible of what's going on in life or with somebody else. Narratives are all about what's going on with somebody else. Physics is about what's going on with those things. In fact, those things and other people, all of that is part of our experience, and they are not mutually exclusive. They are not separate and interacting without each other. They are all aspects of what's going on in our existence, our frame of existence, as it were. And then when you look at the final one, you talk about time, that's the equivalent of desire. Okay, so time is this flow. It can go faster, it can go slower, larger, smaller. Local time, my time, your time, everybody's got a different time because we're all traveling at different speeds. I move my hands and they have a different time than my head because they're going faster. E equals mc squared, time dilation effect. Ooh, play the trombone. Your hands are always going to have a little longer life than the rest of you because they're moving faster relative to you. Okay, so what's the internal equivalent of time? Desire. And why desire? Because it measures what was to what is to what might be. And you look at that and you compare that and say, I like the way it was better, I'm going to change it back. I like that better, I'm going to make that happen. I don't like where this is headed, I'm going to change it. Time is your sense of desire. It's what gives you your motivation. All right, a lot more about that later, but not the freak now. This is too much, too fast already. I just want to get this down on the record, like I said. So, knowledge, thought, ability, and desire. Now, you know what happens in story structure? The most amazing thing. You take the mass and energy and space and time when you're looking outside, okay, and then you look inside to the knowledge, thought, ability, and desire, and they create an interface between the two. The outside and the inside. It's sort of like that's what you've got. You can look inward with your inner eye. You can look outward with your outer eye. You put the two together, and there's your consciousness in the middle, getting squished between these two. You are the interface. I like that phrase. All right. So when you put them together, then they merge. They merge. And you say universe, physics, mind, and psychology. That is the realm that is all-inclusive of both of those, which is why you can have an earthquake happen in a story that nobody made happen. That's the universe, okay? Physics are the processes that are going on, the flood waters that are pouring down, part of your plot. But then you have mind, which is attitudes, okay? Attitudes about things, prejudices, points of view that are locked in. Scrooge had an attitude, okay, that needed changing, but that's what that's about. And finally, psychology. And psychology is the thought processes. Like Hamlet, for example. Hamlet had many opportunities to kill the guy who killed his father, but does he take him? No. Why? Because he overthinks the plumbing. Well, if I kill him now, he might go to heaven. And what kind of retribution is that? This wouldn't be the right time. Finally, he ends up having a tragedy where he doesn't achieve his goal. He dies, and he's miserable, okay? That's a pretty good tragedy, all right? But it's because he overthought the plumbing, because he had a psychology problem. Like somebody who goes for a job They're totally qualified. The people have already met them and loved them. Now they have to go for the in-depth interview. And they're thinking, well, this is going to be make or break. And if I screw up, and they talk themselves to the point that they eventually can't even do the interview, and they lose it because they thought themselves into failure. Okay, this happens all the time, and there's stories about it. And it's because it's reflected in the real world. So I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts before I close this off. This is getting pretty long, and it's got a lot of data. And like I said, it's going to be, layered on. Don't forget to look at the descriptions for all kinds of links to things about this so you can read more on your own and be better prepared for me next time. All right, so here's the last thing I want to leave with you. What's one more area of 4 things? Well, an electric circuit: potential, resistance, current, and power. PRCP, okay? We discovered in our early days of Dramatica development that dramatic circuits existed with PRCP. What's the potential of a scene? What's the resistance to that potential happening? And then you end up with an argument, or you end up with horses coming down a hill, and then you see a brick wall it's too tall for them to jump, okay? And then you have current. Well, how does that unfold? What happens? How does the argument go? And then you have power or outcome at the end. We thought in stories it's better PRCO with outcome, because that's initially what you see in a scene. Every scene has to have a dramatic circuit where you see the potential or resistance, it interacts, and then you end up with where things are at the end. How do things stand afterwards? And that's usually actually a new potential that becomes the point at which it stitches in that spiral onto the next scene. So they spiral on and on and on until you go through an act, all of your acts and all of your story, and you've explored everything, because each potential is resistance, current, power. It's the potential for the next scene, and then it continues to create another dramatic circuit after that. Now remember, when you're storytelling, you don't have to put them in that order. You can start with the resistance. There's a brick wall. Why are we looking at a brick wall? Oh, there's some horses coming down a hill. Wide shot. Oh my gosh, they're headed right for that thing, and there's no way. It's a culvert. They can't escape it. Dam or something, not brick wall, whatever. Okay, and then what happens? Okay, maybe the bulldozer comes out. Maybe the thing at the bottom falls and the horses just go through. Or maybe they just smash through because they're super horses. That's how you introduce something, and that creates a new potential, doesn't it? So, in a sci-fi. So, yes, ambling, yes, all over the place, but I hope you got a few glimpses of what's going on. That's really what this narrative series is about, is not to necessarily take you down to the depths of the equations, and boy, have I got some equations for you that describe all of this very much like E equals MC squared. For example, you'll find that the math that describes a black hole is very similar to the math that describes a prejudice. Okay, it sucks everything in, makes it part of its internal power, but it lashes out just like at the poles with these flashes of energy that come out of black holes, and you'll find that people get hit in that beam of energy, psychologically, psychic energy, all the time. We'll talk more about that later. So anyway, that's the end of this particular episode of Narrative, and we'll continue until I feel that I've said enough. Not when you think I've said enough, but when I'm convinced I've said enough. Until then, may the muse be with you.